Welcome, everyone. I am delighted to be here with you to share my views on retail and its direction of travel. As we all know, retail is going through unprecedented levels of change. So I'm going to try to make sense of some of that change, focusing mainly on the structural side of things over the next 15 minutes. And I have a lot to say. So we'll get started. I like to start out by asking a fairly philosophical question, and that is, what is shopping? What does it mean to go shopping today? According to Merriam-Webster, the definition of shopping is to visit places where goods are sold in order to look at or buy things. That is the definition. I would argue that that definition needs a refresh, because today we can be in our own homes, in our kitchens, pressing an Amazon Dash button, or asking Alexa to add it to our list, and that's shopping as well. So it's fair to say that the path to purchase is no longer linear. As consumers today, we are absolutely spoiled for choice. And we want to shop on our terms, not on the terms dictated to us by the retailer. It's no longer about online versus in-store. Over the past few years, we've seen the emergence of a number of new customer touchpoints, and they're popping up outside of traditional retail channels, in our homes, in objects, in media. And I think what's also important to note here is that we've seen a proliferation of delivery services. So not only do you have a lot of choice as a consumer when it comes to accessing the retailer, but when it comes to getting that item delivered, if you're ordering it online, we have next-day delivery, same-day delivery, one-hour delivery, in-car, in-home delivery, click and collect, scheduled slots. I just read this morning that Amazon will deliver to you if you're on a bus. So it's just getting better and better and better for consumers. But all of this choice has created a lot of complexity for retailers. I think it's important to look at what's changed, look at the past before we look forward, and just remind ourselves about how much change the sector has really undergone over the past decade. So a decade ago, the iPhone was only a couple years old. Now, it's really hard to imagine that a device that's become so integral to our everyday lives has really only been around for just over a decade. Today, 2/3 of the world population is connected via a mobile device. We're ubiquitously connected, we live online, and the rise of mobile has turned retail on its head. Drones, robots, voice technology, all of this sounded like sci-fi 10 years ago. Now it's becoming a reality. 10 years ago, it made sense to go into a big department store or go to an out-of-town superstore because you could find everything you needed under one roof. So this concept of one-stop shopping in a physical location was still very much alive and kicking 10 years ago, whereas now we have access to millions of products, billions of products right at our fingertips, and they turn up on our doorsteps within a day or two, or even on the same day. Click and collect was virtually unheard of a decade ago. It's pretty much Argos, who I keep saying was unknowingly ahead of its time, whereas now it's become a staple on the high street. 10 years ago, we placed an order, we waited a few days for it to arrive. I think same-day delivery will be the norm in urban areas in the near future. Amazon was number 55 in the global retail rankings 10 years ago. Today, they're number 4. E-commerce was the holy grail. Now, as I'll explain in the coming slides, I think pure play e-commerce is dead. The role of the store used to be a place where you went to buy stuff. Now it's becoming more experiential, and it's becoming a hub for fulfillment. And lastly, ownership used to trump access. I think we'll see the rise of rental retail, and just last week, IKEA announced that it would start renting out kitchens to shoppers. So I think that's a trend that we need to look out for as well. I love this quote from Terry Leahy. It says, "The retail market is bifurcating. Either you're disrupting or someone is disrupting you." And I think it really is as simple as that. I think we'll see a growing disparity between the winners and the losers. And the way I describe what we're currently seeing is retail Darwinism. So it's survival of the fittest. It is very much a case of evolve or die, which sounds kind of harsh. I don't think we're facing a retail apocalypse, but we have to address that this is a period of profound structural change. And stores are closing. There is a lot of doom and gloom. Retailers are going bankrupt. We're seeing record levels of job losses. So we have to acknowledge the harsh reality that we have an oversupply of retail space. And we have retail space that's just no longer fit for purpose. When we think about how consumer spending has shifted, and yes, we are shopping more online. I don't think that Amazon is the death knell for retail, but they have had a lot to do with why the retail sector is in such a troubled state. But the fact is, we're shopping more online, and naturally we need fewer stores. So that's not rocket science, that really is just about following the customer. Not only are we seeing differences in what we're spending our money on, because we're ubiquitously connected, so we're spending more online, but also what we're spending our money on. So increasingly, we're prioritizing spend, discretionary spend, on experiences, on going out for a meal, going to the pub, going to the cinema, instead of just buying more stuff, more material goods. And I think this is a fundamental shift in consumer values and priorities. So there's a lot happening, and that's just the structural side of things. I'm not going to get into what's happening on the cost side, inflation and Brexit and business rates. There's a lot of other ingredients in the mix. But it's no surprise that stores are closing at record rates. And I think if we look at it, there's three main reasons why. Either your core category has shifted online, because if the product can be delivered digitally, then there's little hope for the physical space selling that product. So, books, electronics to a certain degree, music, video, although we are seeing a resurgence among bookstores, which is promising. We hear a lot about the Amazon effect, and I would argue that this is the Amazon effect when your core category shifts online. But we hear a lot about the Amazon effect, but what about the Primark effect, or the Aldi effect? So we have some very agile bricks and mortar disruptors that are displacing some of the legacy retailers. And lastly, I think a lot of retailers today are overspaced with questionable relevance. Department stores, specialists that are perhaps no longer special and aren't providing the level of expertise and service in store that they could be to differentiate from online retail. Because the #1 rule in retail is being relevant to your customers. And if you can't offer shoppers what they want in an environment that is well suited to their needs, and if you can't stand out from your rivals, then no, you don't stand a chance, because the climate is very unforgiving. But stores aren't going anywhere. I think this idea of a retail apocalypse and the death of the physical store is grossly exaggerated, because globally, 90% of retail sales still take place in a physical shop. I think what we are seeing is the weaker, more complacent retailers being exposed and ultimately weeded out. And I would argue that's perhaps not such a bad thing for the customer. So stores aren't dying. I think what is dying is pure play e-commerce. About 4 years ago, I put out a prediction that by 2020, we'd see the death of pure play e-commerce. I'll get into the reasons behind that prediction in the next slide, but I just want to show you how things have evolved in that time. So in 2015, it was pretty much Warby Parker, which is a New York-based eyewear retailer, that began opening stores. And they began opening stores profitably. And they found that when they opened stores, it had a halo effect on their online business. They now have around 100 stores. And in that time, we've seen dozens of digitally native brands make that leap into the physical space. The big tech giants, Amazon, Alibaba, JD. I mean, Amazon gets all the publicity, right? But JD is opening 1,000 stores a day in China. So it's clear that there is an opportunity for these digitally native brands to, they're recognizing the need for a physical presence, and there's value in that. Some of these retailers are only testing pop-up stores or concessions in department stores, as we've seen with Boden and Sofa.com and Swoon. Some of these retailers, like ASOS and Wiggle, they don't have actual stores, but they're collaborating with existing bricks and mortar retailers for things like click and collect or returns, which I think is is a ticking time bomb. And also you have retailers like ModCloth and Bonobos, who have then been gobbled up by legacy retailers, in this case Walmart. So why is this happening? Firstly, the structural economic advantages of being an online-only retailer have disappeared. Because at one time, it made sense to avoid opening stores because there were lower overhead costs by doing so. So you didn't have to pay as much staff or electricity. Whereas now, as online shopping has become so popular, shipping costs have gone through the roof. Shipping costs at Amazon have pretty much doubled in the past couple of years. And so having a physical presence can help to alleviate some of those costs. And also, as I say, returns is a real issue, and I think having a physical presence, particularly for Amazon, it will help them in the future. Why else are online retailers moving offline? Well, I think that stores are ripe for disruption. When you walk into a store, it's filled with friction. We still have to wait in line at the checkout. We still have trouble finding products on the shelves. Maybe we want more personalized, tailored offers being directed to us when we're in store. So there's an opportunity there as well. And also, I think the future of retail is blended. So I don't know anybody that really shops exclusively online or exclusively in store. As consumers, we want to marry the best of both worlds, and we want a seamless experience. Consumers don't view retail in channels. We see one brand, and we want a seamless experience across that brand. So as digitally native brands make that leap into the physical space, legacy retailers are having to work on overdrive to keep up. Now, earlier I talked about the Amazon effect being the negative side, the doom and gloom, stores closing, retailers going bankrupt, and there is some truth to that. Amazon has played a role there. But I'd argue that the Amazon effect has a second meaning, which is to stamp out complacency. And I think that Amazon has, in many ways, actually been a positive force for the industry, and that it's forced everyone else to kick into gear. And the one that wins is the customer. As customers today, we have a much better experience because everyone is trying to either keep up with or distance themselves from Amazon. And I think in the future, online shopping will become, it's already pretty effortless. It's going to get even easier. So at the moment, we still have to, as consumers, we still have to take part in the decision-making process of transacting. So we still have to ask Alexa. We still have to press an Amazon dash button. In the future, things will be automatically replenished. That's the way that things are going, and I think that's Amazon's end goal in grocery, is to take the chore out of grocery shopping and just make our lives easier, free up our time to focus on more enjoyable tasks. So in the future, when we run out of toilet paper or bleach or toothpaste or pet food, it'll just automatically turn up. So what does this mean for stores? Well, stores are going to have to get a lot more exciting. We're going to have to give shoppers more of a reason to come into the store. And I think we should be rethinking the layout of the store and also the broader purpose of the physical space. So in the future, I think we'll see a greater divergence between functional and fun shopping. Or in other words, a divergence between transacting or purchasing and shopping, which should be pleasurable and fun. And I think we all know by now that the role of the store is shifting from going beyond product to offering more of an experience. And these are just a few headlines of the many, many, many out there, just to demonstrate how some retailers are repurposing the physical space in order to adapt to changing customer demands. And I think this also brings up another important point, is should we be reevaluating the very terminology that we use? What is a retailer? Apple doesn't want its stores to be called stores anymore. They want it to be town squares because they want to capitalize on community and experience. Same with Rafa, the cycling brand here in the UK. They call their stores clubhouses. So again, for those niche brands, they can tap into community, leisure, experience, all the things that Amazon can't do. So here's how I think the retail space will be redefined in the future. I think, as I said, it has to become more experiential. You have to give shoppers a reason to ditch their screens, right? Because we can buy anything online today. So you have to focus on the things that Amazon in particular can't do. And Amazon can't pour us a cup of coffee yet. They can't do curation. They can't do personalization, community, leisure, services. And I think these are the types of things that physical retailers should be looking to do to distance themselves from Amazon. I think that retail is going to become even more collaborative, whether that's through tech partnerships, Microsoft, Google, Ocado. These are tech companies that have massively benefited from Amazon's rise as other retailers look to keep up with Amazon. Also, I think we need to bear in mind that this idea of retail as a service, this idea that retailers need to transcend the transaction. And I think that in the future, this will also have an impact on customer service in store, and also the role of the store employee. I think we're moving, just as the role of the store is evolving, I think the role of the store employee will evolve to become more consultative, to become more empowered, and to take on more of a brand ambassador role. And there's tons of great examples. John Lewis is a fantastic one. They're sending their staff to theater training so that they can provide an excellent customer experience in store. And they're also letting their shoppers, their employees take greater control over social media. And now John Lewis, I know, is sort of an exception to the rule because of their partnership structure, but it's really about empowering employees and enabling them to provide a better customer experience. So I think we're going to see a lot more investment in that area. But the store of the future also has to be blended. As I said, it has to become a mini hub for fulfillment, catering to click and collect, returns. I think we'll see better visibility of store inventory, so retailers can deliver to shoppers within an hour or two, because as I said, I think that will be the norm in urban areas. And lastly, the store of the future has to be frictionless. So Amazon in particular is looking to technology to bring the physical store into the 21st century and to level the playing field with online retail when it comes to things like convenience and ease and personalization as well. So in summary, retail isn't dying. I think what is dying is mediocre retail, and that's perhaps not such a bad thing for customers. I think the future of retail, in one word, is blended, and that we'll continue to see convergence between physical and digital retail, but also in the sense that retail space will be less about retail in the future, and we'll see a continued blurring of retail, hospitality, and leisure. And lastly, as we all know, embrace change or risk extinction. It is dog-eat-dog world out there, and I think that for those retailers that are willing to embrace change, it's actually a fantastically exciting time to be in retail. So thank you very much.
I'm supposed to talk about how our industry is being disrupted by technology, and we just heard from Natalie what it does to the retailers. A lot of threat, but also a lot of opportunity. I think we can be quite lucky that it came late to the real estate industry. Other industries were kind of hit earlier than we are. But now it's coming with a lot of strengths and a lot of force. And so it is something which we all should be really aware about. I'm trying to give you a little bit our approach to it. And in order to set the stage, I hope that most of you know about JLL, but I give you a little bit more information. So JLL is a Fortune 500 company growing very rapidly. Currently employ about 90,000 people around the globe. And what is important about that is we are not only a Fortune 500 company, we are deeply embedded with these big global corporates. 90% of the Fortune 100 companies are live and ongoing clients for us, and we have another big stake of clients in the Fortune 500. And why is that so important for us? Because those corporate clients, their strategies define the future need for real estate. The way they want to kind of occupy space is incredibly important when we serve our investor clients, because we have a pretty well-balanced business between investor clients and corporate clients, and we have to understand those corporate clients in order to advise investor clients. So when you approach that whole question around technology and how it will change your business, you have to be kind of bringing it down to a couple of basic trends in your industry, how they will impact your business. And I hope that is also true for you. We have come up with those 4 basic trends. First and foremost, what we have seen over the last 10 years is that we have significant increase in the allocations to real estate as an asset class. So it's not only that the overall amount of money which is looking for a home, it is that the proportion which is looking for a home in real estate is growing. So what we see is that the target proportion is going towards 11%. When you look at what is globally invested with most of the pension funds, on average, they sit below 9, so there's still a massive gap what needs to be invested, and that number is growing, and that's a pretty steady trend, irrespective of other secular trends. We have a very strong growth in corporate real estate outsourcing, and that is driven by the fact that real estate has become much more as a cost play for corporates. Real estate has become a productivity play. It's important for the brand perception of a company. It's very important around attracting and retaining talent. This is growing by roughly 8% every single year. And again, that is a trend which will last for a very, very long time going forward. And then the one, urbanization, we have spoken about that a lot. I just encourage everybody not to underestimate that trend. People in the emerging environments are moving into the big cities for finding a better job and having a better life, but also in mature economies, in economies with very bad demographics, people are moving into the big cities. And for most of us in this room, we all have more or less a business which is focused on the big cities and the surroundings. So even in a country with very bad demographics like Russia, Moscow is growing massively, St. Petersburg is growing massively, so our target market is growing as we sit here. And then the final one, which is more or less the topic of what we are trying to discuss in the next hour, is the fourth industrial revolution, how that is changing the world and how that is impacting us as a threat, but also as an opportunity. 2 weeks ago, the World Economic Forum at Davos was taking that theme of artificial intelligence and how the fourth industrial revolution is impacting the world. We have been partners as JLL for the World Economic Forum for more than a decade, and so we tend to run panel discussions there. This year's panel discussion was under the headline, Reimagining Work in the Age of AI. And it was the first time that we had to say, C-suite members, CEOs, that they can't come in because the room was completely overcrowded, which is just a demonstration how high on the agenda that change is for the people who are running the major corporates of the world. So the way we look at the challenge is very much described by that statistic which the Forbes magazine is offering. Personally, I'm not so worried about the 75% of the Fortune 1000 companies which have been replaced over the last 10 years. I am much more concerned about their prediction that 50% of the Fortune 500 companies will completely stop to exist within the next 10 years. So put yourself into my shoes. Nobody wants to be a CEO of a company which will go down during the time when you carry the responsibility. So you will understand that I'm pretty paranoid about that topic and that I'm driving the transformation of JLL with a high sense of urgency. So navigating that change, you have to assess a little bit where does it hit you. And the troublesome piece around that question is it hits us everywhere. It hits every single service we provide, and unfortunately, it hits us differently in different geographies because market practices are slightly different. So we have different disruption to our leasing business in Australia than we have in France, than we have in the US, and I can do that with every service, valuation, property management. There is a lot of approaches to try to disrupt us. So the first approach, what we did when we put that high on the agenda, we were trying to create a high sense of urgency within our organization amongst all our leaders across the world. And there's one way of going on stage, and I did that in 2013 and predicted that 10 years from 2013, JLL will be a technology company servicing in real estate. But we had to put some credibility around that topic. And so we were starting to go out and hire really credible tech people. And we hired them in a different way because we defined that it has to be buy, build, and partner around technology. So on the build piece, we hired Vinay Goel, who is now our head of digital products. He is one of those guys who were instrumental at Google to get to Google Maps, which we all use. We bought a couple of companies. Two I want to name here, is the company of Tracy Doan and another one of Rick Michaud. So they have created tech companies in the real estate space, and we were able to convince them that they could scale their business, their vision much faster in a JLL environment. So they came on board with their companies. And then we were thinking about, we have to get into that startup world. So we were able to get Mihir and Ishai into our organization. They were themselves very successful startup entrepreneurs, sold their business when they were still young at age, became highly successful angel investors in the Silicon Valley, and then they joined us 2 years ago to build with us JLL Spark, and JLL Spark is an incubator for the prop tech world based in San Francisco, and that is an example of what we try to deliver to become credible with regards to our own people, to take them on the journey, and also with regards to our clients. So one of the things we did, we were kind of encouraging our people within country to come up with new approaches. And one was NXT Office, which was first developed in Paris, which is creating a completely new experience how you identify space. So for those of you who haven't been in one of our NXT rooms, here's a nice one in London in our headquarters at Warwick Street, it completely changes the process to identify your next office. And we are using a lot of technology, we are using a lot of data and AI to help to reduce that process, to increase your productivity and hand time back to you and make that much more seamless. So that is, within a given service, a new approach. Another opportunity which technology offers is a product which we call Stessa. And as you know, we are pretty much a B2B company. It's very hard for us to access the consumer. But there are a lot of people out there, most of you probably, who own a couple of flats, maybe own a small commercial unit or a couple of small commercial units. And it's very hard to operate that. It creates a lot of work. So we have created an app. Unfortunately, at the moment, it's only live in the US, which allows you to asset management your personal portfolio in a very seamless way. We went live with that product in October 2018. And since we are live, we are adding about 1 billion assets under management per week. So the last stat I was receiving was at year end, we went through the 10 billion number. I don't know whether that app will fly and whether we will ever make money on it. But we have learned already so much about the discipline, what is it what consumers really want when they invest into real estate, what drives them, how much emotions are in the decision making. So there's a lot of learning for us in it, and hopefully 2019 turns out to be that it was a good bet to bet on. And then I come back to JLL Spark. JLL Spark has kind of identified routes to new products. Stessa was one product coming out of JLL Spark, which we nurture in our Spark office. But then we observed how quickly that whole prop tech market is developing and how much talent is coming into the prop tech market. So we said we have to accelerate our approach to that whole discussion. And we started an in-house venture capital fund. And the big difference with that venture capital fund to usual venture capital funds is that we are less interested in the return on our capital. The main driver for us is, does that new technology, does that new business model create value for our clients? Is there something in it which will change the experience for our clients? And that's the way how we kind of put all these ideas which come to us into a funnel. And once we have shortlisted ideas, we bring them to some of our clients and we test them live. And if we see that clients really see added value, we take a share in the company, we start nurturing them, and then we scale them by rolling it out into our client base. So these are just a couple of logos of companies we invested in. So far, we have invested into 11 startups. More recently, maybe you know that here in the UK, there's a company called Hubble, which has the big vision to become the world's largest online office broker. We thought this is pretty credible, their story, so we invested into Hubble as well. So you will have Spark people not only in the Silicon Valley, we have people here in Europe, but also in India and China. So, providing a clear view. This is the piece which I find most challenging around that topic. Now, I'm not a tech guy, but I try to understand what's going on. And there's so much going on that you can get very confused. So you have to come back to the points which are really relevant for your clients, which are really relevant for your employees. What is it what will drive long-term value? And at the end of the day, you will not be surprised. It comes all back to the human experience. We have today a workforce which is in the privileged position that they are calling the shots. When I started working and you wanted to work for a big company, they would tell you, this is where you start working, this is the department, and you would say, thank you very much, and you sit down and start working. Whereas in today's world, we have young people who are saying, you know what, I think I want to live in Berlin, or I think I want to live in Sydney. And then you say, oh yeah, thank you very much. You can live in Berlin, you can live in Sydney, we will accommodate it. And so the human experience is incredibly important to get the best talent in. And you want them to be really engaged with your organization, really drive and feel for that organization. And they all want a sense of control and a sense of empowerment. And you know, that sometimes feels a bit counterintuitive with all that technology. So technology shouldn't lead the people should drive technology, lead technology, and that is really, really important. Because at the end of the day, what we all want is what they want. They want to be happy, they want to have fun when they work, and so you have to create an environment where all that exciting technology, all that exciting data serves a purpose. And that purpose is very much described in that human factor. If they are happy, they make your clients happy, you will be successful, and then you will be one of those companies which is not dropping out in the next 10 years. Thank you very much.
Natalie, I wanted to kind of start with you and sort of the laser focus that Amazon has on kind of customer experience. And really, why has that become such a theme across all businesses? Why has what Amazon done been so kind of influential?
Yeah, I think all retailers like to think of themselves as customer-centric, of course. Yeah. But with Amazon, they're genuinely obsessed with their customers, obsessed with improving the customer experience. And as we say in the book, we feel that they have, our phrase is, a relentless dissatisfaction with the status quo. And that's partly because, you know, if we start at a high level, Amazon isn't actually a retailer. Amazon is a technology company that does customer experience, that sells a lot of stuff in the process. So they are a tech company at heart, and that's in their DNA. They spend more on research and development than any other American company. And of course, you know, they can throw stuff up against the wall and just see what sticks because they play by a very different set of rules. So I think that they have had some sort of competitive advantages right from the very beginning. And yes, you have to acknowledge that, you know, the playing field has definitely been tilted in their favor. You know, right from the moment that Jeff Bezos convinced its first investors in a growth over profit strategy. So you have to acknowledge that to really understand Amazon. But I think that, you know, having a relentless focus on the customer, always looking at ways to improve the experience is something that all retailers can learn from.
Yeah. And Christian, talking about that sort of growth over profit strategy, someone's asking here about how your shareholders feel about the idea that your kind of Spark fund, you know, is looking for ideas and the future rather than more immediate returns.
Yeah, you get a very mixed reaction. We have shareholders who came up to me and said, listen, if we wanted to invest into a technology company, we would do so, and it wouldn't be JLL, our first choice. And we have, on the other end of the spectrum, investors who said, well, listen, Christian, I think the strategy is brilliant. We should take you private, and then you can really start investing into it, because at the moment, we are obviously limited to the fact that we have to deliver quarterly results, and they tend the expectation tends to be that they should be higher than the quarter a year before. So we took the approach that when I took office, we kind of worked on the strategy going forward. Then we called for an investor day, and we were very transparent. We said to the market, listen, we will run this company for the next couple of years between a 12 to 14% EBITDA margin. We could do more, but we won't. Whenever we have more profits, we will invest those profits into technology. And only if we have less profits than that, we will probably slow down a little bit. Yeah. Now, the market environment has been very favorable to us, so we could increase significantly our investment into technology. But I think transparency is very important. And then they can decide whether they think JLL is a good idea or whether somebody else is a better idea.
And then you mentioned you're obviously a B2B business, yet the themes and the trends that we hear, like you talk about your workforce, are about the consumer influencing you. So do you feel that that is influencing your business, that actually it's not just about the lease, it's about who's being, the employees in the building that you've leased it to?
Well, I think that is the important connection. Any employee is also a consumer. So whatever consumer think is what your employees think and the employees of your clients think.
But that's changed, right?
And so we shouldn't dismiss that and be very focused on that topic. And I think that is the big change. What I said earlier around that the talent is calling the shots was a very sloppy way to say that there's a much higher focus from all corporates in listening to the broader set of stakeholders where the employees are a big part of it, but also the community. I mean, when you use the Amazon example, all of you who have been in Seattle, you have not only Amazon, it used to be the headquarters of Boeing, you have Starbucks, you have Microsoft, you have 4 very large successful companies. The world of Seattle has changed over the last 10 years massively, and if you're not part of these 4 companies, you kind of scratch your head why you can't afford an apartment anymore, why you can't afford a restaurant anymore, and why you're constantly in a traffic jam. And so that is one of the reasons why a company like Amazon was forced to move out of Seattle and come to new locations, because it becomes unbearable for that local community. And what we have to learn as big corporate leaders, we have to be part of the local community as well, because your employees expect that from you. They only want to work for companies who feel responsible around all stakeholders.
And thinking about your workforce, how do you see that shaping up in the future? You're going to bring more technology in. Are you going to need different type of people? Where does AI fit into the shape of what your company will look like in, say, 5 to 10 years' time?
Yeah, this is a massive shift. I mean, we used to employ graduates who wanted to have a career in real estate. We have a lot of real estate experts within JLL. What we are missing are data analysts. We are missing kind of people who are really knowing how to combine technology into the sales process. We are working on getting more industry specialism into our organization, because there's a lot of specialism. When you are trying to deal with the financial industry, you need different requirements from your people than people who are dealing with the consumer industry. And so I think we will get to a much more diverse workforce in all meanings of the word diverse.
Okay. And Natalie, quite a few people are asking about physical retail, so I'll bounce the question. We'll bounce it on to Christian if you're more on the retailer side. But just thinking more about sort of, how do you tell what kind of retail space is the right size and the right place in the future? Big question.
Good question.
Christian can think about that one as well, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, just to back up and acknowledge just how much experimentation Amazon's doing with physical retail. About 7 years ago, Jeff Bezos was asked if he would ever move into stores, and his answer then was, well, look, consumers are very well served by existing retailers, so we would only do it if we had something really different and unique to offer to the customer. And I think it's fair to say that they've done very unique and different things, stripping out checkouts. Their 4-star store in New York only stocks merchandise that's had at least 4-star ratings from their website. So I think they're trying to obviously use their advantage as a data-driven technology company, an online retailer, and try to translate that into a physical setting. Now, that's not as easy as it sounds, and I think the jury is still out as to whether or not Amazon, one of the most disruptive retailers in the world can do one of the most fundamental things in retail, which is to run stores. Because there's, the art of curation. And, having the constraints of 4 walls is new to Amazon. So I think, especially when it comes to grocery, they're experimenting a ton. And I think if and when they come up with the right format, they're obviously experimenting a lot with Whole Foods, 2-hour delivery, taking those stores and catering to customer demands for same-day delivery, focusing on the things you can't get online, which is fresh, one of the reasons why they bought Whole Foods. Also, Whole Foods is very well represented in urban areas. So I think there's lots of different factors there, but I think once they come up with a scalable format, then we could see them look to export that internationally. And I really feel that Amazon will acquire a European grocer within the next couple of years.
And do you think they'll be as influential in the physical space as they are in the online space?
I think the jury's still out. I think they've recognized that, as I said in my presentation, that the future of retail is blended. And shoppers want, stores are a lot more compelling. There's still a lot of friction. There's still room for improvement. And that's what Amazon loves a challenge. So they'll come in and strip out checkouts and do, use tech to provide a better experience in store. But stores are a lot more compelling now than they were 10 years ago because of digital integration. So click and collect, for example, was the first step at bridging that gap between physical and digital retail. And now there's all kinds of technology that retailers are using in store, augmented reality, virtual reality. I think some of it has perhaps a longer shelf life than others, and I think there is a risk of doing tech for tech's sake. Yeah. But the fact is, consumers today are switched on, they're using their phones in stores, and there's an opportunity for online retailers to move into that physical space.
I mean, one thing the tech companies haven't done, which other companies done, is go through a crisis. And Christian, I mean, you look at the property industry's gone through many crises. How do you feel about kind of competing against the ideas of tech companies when the downturn comes? Are we going to learn who's going to kind of survive then? And JLL's incorporation of technology will be the way to go.
Well, the new kid on the block has always the benefit of the sympathy of most people, so they can tell a cool story. We have seen that around Amazon. We are seeing it with Tesla in the automotive sector. We're seeing it with WeWork in the flex space sector. But there's one thing to build a new company with a couple of people or smart people in a room and kind of carry it from that point on. It's another thing to run a company for the long term, build a sustainable business model, and take responsibility for a large number of employees. Yeah. And so we have to see how these things are playing out. What I find really interesting, I'm not an expert on Amazon, but when Amazon is coming into the physical space, they have currently a valuation of a tech company. If they come into the physical space, that means different returns. When you look at Tesla, they have a valuation of a tech company, but at the end of the day, they're building cars. They're not a tech company, they're building cars. And their monetization model is selling cars. They're talking a lot about all the other things they want to do around cars, but when you look at their income stream, it is selling cars. And you can go to WeWork, and you can hear about the platform of WeWork, which is amazing, and I'm a big supporter of WeWork. But when I look at the valuation and where the income stream is coming from, the income stream is leasing space. And then you look at the valuation, and then you kind of scratch your head and you wonder whether that is sustainable. And I think that is the reality which all these tech firms will eventually face when they move out of their space of being only technology companies.
Okay. I think one of the things that intrigued me about that Amazon is also that ability to fail, that Jeff Bezos' business has not always done the right thing. Well, it's had failures. Can you tell us about that and what the ethos is on that? Then I'm interested, Christian, whether you're prepared to, to have some failures within, again, that public scrutiny.
Yeah, I think just taking a step back, what sets Amazon apart, and they're very clear about this, is 3 things. It's, as we said, customer obsession. The fact that they are a tech company, they're innovating, they love to invent and experiment for customers, and that they have this long-term vision. That's the 3rd aspect. And I think when you combine those 3 factors, you can begin to understand how Amazon got to where it did today. But, as Jeff Bezos himself says, innovation and failure are inseparable twins. And I love that quote because I think it really sums up what Amazon's all about. A lot of stuff that they try doesn't work out. And that's
Give us a couple of examples.
Yeah, sure. So let's think. Amazon, their smartphone, I think, is the best example of their failure. Led to a $170 million write-off. But I think if we think about the failure of the smartphone, you know, Amazon is trying to get into a lot of different sectors at the moment.
Yeah.
Okay, so not just within retail, grocery and fashion, they're really going after, but also looking outside of retail, other consumer-facing sectors, banking, healthcare, home security. I mean, the list just goes on and on and on. But I think, you know, not everything they touch turns to gold. And the smartphone failure was arguably their biggest, but they also learned from that. And then it eventually led to them coming up with the Echo device and Alexa, which is really, you know, what many analysts see as sort of the fourth pillar of Amazon now after Marketplace, Prime, and AWS. So Amazon, you know, it's a really complicated beast, but I think the fact is that, you know, they spend a lot, they're not afraid to fail, but they, you know, they don't have to, you know, report to their shareholders every quarter, report that growth. And when they do report profits, everyone's surprised because they're expected to, you know, recycle that cash back into the business. Yep. So they, you know, in many ways, they do play by their own set of rules.
And Christian, are you going to have your own set of rules now?
Well, we're still developing those rules. I mean, as you can imagine, when you move into uncharted territory, not only within our industry uncharted territory, but clearly within JLL uncharted territory, we have always been a pretty conservative organization going back to 1760. So when you look into something like Stessa, you know, I can already hear all the commentary coming from our board if Stessa fails, because we are spending a lot of money on Stessa. And if that were to fail, they will tell me, well, Christian, how on earth could you accept that we're moving into the C business? We always have been a B2B company, and it was so clear that this will fail. And if it works out, they will just say, well, that is what we had to do. We had to move into technology. And so, you know, you have to kind of stick to your beliefs, and you have to accept that a lot of those investment will just be completely lost. But I don't, and I think Natalie pointed to that, I don't believe anymore in B2B and B2C. We are dealing with human beings, whether they are our employees, whether they are our customers, or whether they are consumers. At the end of the day, those human beings are driving into their lives their beliefs because they can. You know, when you look into mature societies, people are affluent enough to make their calls. And that is changing very much the way we have to deal with them. And so that's why I believe that whole difference of B2B, B2C is changing. And we as a traditional B2B company have to be very focused on what the consumer wants, because that at the end of the day will drive the decision making of our clients.
Okay. All right, well, thank you very much. This has been a really interesting session. Please join me in thanking Natalie and Christian. Okay, thank you very much.